Welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming today. My name is Lucy Watts. I am the director at the Hruska Library. Tonight's program is provided by a partnership with the Butler County Historical Society, the Hruska Memorial Library, and the Butler County Area Foundation Fund. We'll start off this evening with our friends of the library drawing. So Sandy Hutchinson, you want a plate of kolaches? Tonight's program is being filmed. It will be available to view anytime on the Butler County Historical Society YouTube channel. Because we are filming, it's very important that you turn off your cell phones so that they don't ring during the filming. Tonight's program is about country schools, the little one-room schoolhouses where rural children went to school. Our presenter is Carm Fiala, a Butler County Historical Society member, retired teacher, and administrator. She will take us back on these simple times that had many of us over the age of 60 remembering well. So now please turn off of your cell phones and welcome Carm Fiala.
Right mood for this evening's topic. I am so happy to see so many of you here. I've been looking forward to this program, but I've always also been a little nervous. I have a whole group of my former teachers right there. That's one thing, and some students here too, of past. After I retired from teaching and being a principal for 46 years, I thought I would never have to talk in front of a huge group of people again. But here I am, and I am sure that you will be a much more easier group than 150 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, or 100 high schoolers, or a gym full of parents. So we're going to begin now. So thank you, Gina. This is my hickory stick, by the way. Thank you, Gina, for encouraging me to speak a piece, as they would have called a speech in the pioneer days. Thank you also for the many people, so many people, who contributed information, photos, and other items from their country schools. I appreciate every one of you. It really helped out to have all that information. Let's see how many of you went to a country school. Raise your hand. Wow, so many. I think I will be preaching to the choir, right? Each of you is more of an expert than I could ever be. I hope that some of you will share some of your memories at the end of the program. I also like to recognize all the country school teachers. While interviewing some of these teachers, I noticed that their faces lit up when they spoke about their students. And I also recognize that these teachers, who probably taught in the 1940s, the 1950s, maybe the 60s, are the last generation of country school teachers, a very dedicated, creative, and resourceful group of educators. Would anyone who taught, and I know there are some here, taught in a country school, please stand or raise your hand. Let's give them a round of applause. There is a teacher honor poster in the back on one of the display tables. And I invite you to write the name of your teacher, the school, and possibly a note. Two of my hobbies are photography and gardening. I had to throw in a few flowers of mine in the picture. I have looked at a lot of photos in the past few months, and my garden is feeling a little neglected. However, it's even looking neglected right now. I wish that A.V. Thomas, who did the photo album of David City homes in 1904 would have done a similar photo album of district schools. In that same year, all 94 would have existed, and we would have had photos of all of those 94 schools. I did not find photos of every single school, and I apologize if I didn't get yours. Also, some photos were too poor quality to enlarge. You know, they're very old, some of them, so to enlarge onto the screen was difficult. As I did my research, I found that there were some discrepancies in the facts of country school history, so I tried to do my best with what I found. I also have a notebook on the display table where you can leave me a message of some of the, maybe some more pictures that you have or some information. I know some people talked to me right before the program about some things. Um, let's imagine that we are in Ada Vander Koch's classroom in the first school, District 1, Ed Home, in 1868. She always started her class, a school day, with a prayer, but not the Pledge of Allegiance. Why? That's because the Pledge of Allegiance was not written until 1892, and not until 1952, when President Eisenhower added it, was "under God said." Since we have only a 1-hour class, I will dispense with the daily checking of the hands and the fingernails and the ears and the teeth and the hair to see if you're all clean. When I began planning this class, I had no idea how I was going to cover 94 schools in 1 hour. And a teacher can do a lot in an hour, but I couldn't figure out how this was going to be possible. So I decided to focus on what these schools shared, what they had in common. I have 2 goals tonight. If you attended a country one-room school, which looks like many of you did, I hope this presentation brings back a lot of good memories, a walk down memory lane. And if you did not attend a country school and don't know much about these schools, I hope you can gain some insight on what it was like to be a student in these schools and the importance of these schools in history. As a former teacher, I feel like I should say, you are responsible for this material, and there will be a test tomorrow. Does anyone recognize this? Oh, you do? I have a paddle. It's nice and light, easily handled. And if anybody misbehaves, you can take this as your punishment. Or if you would rather, I have my little things here, a ruler on the knuckles. Anybody remember that? Some of you are moaning because you do remember that, right? Let's look at the history for a little bit. The records at the Nebraska Historical Society indicate that the first school in Nebraska Territory was established in 1822 at Fort Atkinson in Washington County near present-day Fort Calhoun. During the 1830s and the 40s, missionary schools were established near Bellevue, Nebraska. In 1860, there were only 34 schoolhouses in the whole Nebraska Territory. And you have to remember that the Nebraska Territory was much bigger than Nebraska State is now. And there is evidence that there were some schools in individual homes in Nebraska, for example, like a homeschool, including one near present-day Brainerd in the home of Francis Crowley. Started teaching in her home about 1865, before the first organized school was built in our county in 1867. In the West, during the 1800s, people spoke a variety of languages and held different religious beliefs. Schools, therefore, took priority, and church services were often held in the school. Soon, every community had a framed schoolhouse, while the settlers were still living in their sod homes or their dugouts. The belief was that a community with a school was a community with a future. Therefore, the importance of a good school structure more so than their own home. The first schools in Nebraska were pay schools or subscription schools. The parents paid a certain amount for each child who attended. The subscription amount averaged at about $6 per student per session. Reading and spelling were the subjects taught in most cases, but some penmanship and arithmetic were taught in some of these schools. Schools were used for church services on Sunday, political meetings, voting places, funerals, and community entertainment. They were always the center of community. Many times it was a social place to be. For example, box social auctions were like a prelude to the blind date. Steve Schmidt told me that his grandma's box social at District 59 in Summit Township was where she met her future husband, Nick Schmidt. Grandma Schmidt went to school with Dale Nichols, the now famous David City artist. Grandma Schmidt told Steve that she often wondered how many masterpieces were thrown in the trash when the teacher found Dale sketching instead of doing his homework. After Nebraska became a state in 1867, schoolhouses were erected at a quick rate. Many settlers coming in on account of the Homestead Act and the expansion of the railroad. The average size of one of these school buildings was 16 feet by 12 feet wide by 7 feet high, not a very high roof, about the size of maybe not even this much space, and built with rough cut logs and sod roof. Often the school building was little more than one room with an entryway, hot-bellied stove, and a blackboard. Many had bell towers, which called the children to school, but also indicated that someone was lost or hurt or another peril of the community, such as a prairie fire. This bell was similar to the fire and rescue system that we have. The bell pictured is from District 87 near Ulysses, and the Ulysses community treasures that bell. In 1867, the year that Nebraska became a state, and 1 year before the county became officially Butler County, when the population reached the required 200 residents, the first school was built in the county. This building was only 10 by 12 feet. It was made of logs. It was located about 2.5 miles north of present location of Octavia in Bone Creek Township. The children attending were from the families of D.R. Gardner, James Blair, William Butler, James Green, and Mrs. Solomon Garfield. You might recognize these names as some of the earliest settlers of Butler County. Ada Vanden Koch, the first teacher in the county, was born in Holland and came to America with her parents, who eventually moved to Butler County in 1867 after her mother died in Iowa. Ada taught at District 1 at age 18 and was paid $20 per month, and taught until she married James V. Wood in 1874 and realized that, the girls always had to quit teaching when they got married. They had 2 children, Murda and Viger, who both died in infancy, and Ada died from an infection after the birth of Viger in 1876. Interestingly, J.V. Wood, a Civil War veteran, as several of the settlers were Civil War veterans, married 2 times after Ada died. The first, Tabitha, was a sister to Ada, and then Etta, who in some accounts is stated to be a sister of Ada's too. However, after more research, I found that Eda's maiden name was Papa. So not a sister to Ada, but from a family that's in the location. James V. Wood lived until 80 years old, and he and his 3 wives and 2 of his 3 children are buried in the David City Cemetery. In 1869, the county school system was organized under the supervision of Hub Pepper. And Hub Pepper, you might recognize him as a early settler of the northwest part of Butler County. He was acting as superintendent, and he organized 9 districts in 1869. At the first school census that year, it was found that there were 153 children of school age 5 to 21 in the county. 1 year later, in 1870, the number of pupils had increased 51 to 204. That year, the state aid to schools was made. The sums distributed to each school district was $111.50. That's amazing compared to what they get now. The average wages of the teachers were $20 to $26 per month. To compare, this school year, the base salary of a David City public first-year teacher for a month will be approximately $3,200. Now we're going to look at a map of Butler County, and these maps are in the back so you can look at it more closely. Also, the QR code can be used to take your phone, take a picture, and you can get this map. I would like to point out there are the townships and the districts. I'd like to point out the first 9. Notice that they are in settlement areas. Let's start over here. This is 1. That's the one that Ada taught at, and it was called At Home. This is 2. That's Linwood. On the west of 1 is 3, Garfield. Then you move all the way down to Surprise, number 4. 5 is in Ulysses. 6 is over here by Brainerd, east of Brainerd. 7 is way up here on the Platte River. 8 is back here by Brainerd, north of Brainerd, and now this is along the Highway 92. And 9 is up here, Savannah. So you see that they were all in settlement areas, the first 9. In 1867, Butler County possessed one schoolhouse. Well, in the year 1870, 3 years later, there were 54 schoolhouses already. 48 of these were framed houses, and with an average value of $577, which would have been quite a bit in the prairie days. And then the other 6 structures were most likely sod. Since schoolhouses throughout the United States were built from local, easily obtained materials, thus sod, wood, and logs in Nebraska. The first local schools were little more than huts with dirt floors. All labor was donated and school supplies were collected from meager resources. I read a book about a teacher who taught in the 1920s. She taught in the west part of Nebraska, and her school didn't even have a globe or a map, or and she didn't have a flag in her school. So the kids brought material to make their own flag, and one of the students brought a ball. They cut out pictures of the countries from a old atlas, and they pasted them onto the ball, and they had a globe and a flag. So meager resources. This school is District 20, built in 1870. And notice that in the photo, it is being ready to be moved by steam engine. That was later in its life. One of these 9 schools was District 6. It was near Urban, which is a lost town, and it's in Oak Creek Township, east of present-day Brainerd. It was established in 1869. John Harding Brown, son of James and Phoebe Brown, early settlers of Urban, wrote about his pioneer school. Here are John Brown's words.
There was not a house nearer than 20 miles, and there were only 2 families in the area. I believe the first school I attended was at a neighbor's house. His wife was the teacher. Later, 1869, a hole was dug in the side of a hill and a large log was laid in the center of the excavation, and poles were laid from this log out to the banks of the dugout. There were 2 small windows in the south end and a door. Seats were made from slabs split from logs and sticks stuck in them for legs. There was a fireplace in the north end to burn wood to keep us warm. Later, they built a house of lumber and made seats of boards with backs on them. We thought we had a good school then. I only went to school 3 or 4 months a year, for I had to herd the sheep first, and then the cattle, and then to work in the field. I learned to read, spell, and figure very well. I used to figure interest on Father's notes.
The right picture is an early picture of District 6. And when he talks about going to school at a home, I believe that might be Frances Crowley's home. That was kind of the area. And she started teaching in her home in 1865, and the dugout school, was built in 1869, so that might be the school. By 1883, there were 75 school districts in the county, and by 1901, the last of the 94 total county districts, District 94, located in the Plum Creek Township near Dwight, was established. Many of the schools were named by a name of either a location or a family who donated the land or the name of the children attending. So District 1 was known as Edholm, which was a lost town, and District 3 as Garfield, that was the name of a family. The numbers were not in order, so it's kind of hard to find your school if you didn't know, the number. It didn't go, it was according to when it was established. That's why they're all over the place. Many of the country's town schools began as one-room schools too, such as Bruno's 86, District 86. I also want to say that there was one Lutheran one-room school in the county, Emmanuel Lutheran School near Millerton. And Millerton is another lost town near Garrison. It was created in 1884 using the first Lutheran church building when the new church was built. There were about 25 students the first few years, and it grew to the 70s of 70 students. It closed in the 1960s. Another parochial school in the country near north of David City, Marietta Catholic School, was not a one-room school, for it was a K-12 system. We hope in the future that we can have a program on the K-12 school systems and parochial schools such as Marietta. Schools were located within walking distance, or at least pony riding distance, of the students' homes. District sizes range from 4 square miles to 12 square miles in the Ulysses area mostly. Usually students had to walk not more than 2 miles to their home from their school. So when your parents said that they had to walk barefoot 5 miles to school and 5 miles home, uphill both ways, they were probably exaggerating. This is Arnaz Gans, who taught in the country schools in the area for 38 years. Here she is with her fourth graders from her first school, District 7, north of Bellwood. One of her favorite memories when at District 3 was the time Susie Papa rode her pony to school. It was a long school day, it was a hot school day, and the pony got tired and went home without her. In 1920, standardization in school buildings was established. The common white-framed one-room school within walking distance of the family farm was duplicated in every district. That is why so many of the country schools look alike. In fact, District 33, Pleasant Hill, is identical to District 43, Rising Sun. Jane is shaking her head yes, right? And also in the 1920s, because of this standardization, many of the original school buildings were replaced with new buildings so they could have all the aspects of the standardization. And some of those were physical aspects included well site, a good outdoor bathroom, which, I remember the outdoor bathroom, the outhouses. I don't know how good they were, but there would be wasps building nests in them. Remember that? And there would be like snakes and spiders, and once in a while a mouse. And do you remember one of the families would always donate the Montgomery Ward's catalog to be used in the outhouse? You also needed to have some playground equipment and a flagpole, of course. Without electricity and little budget for kerosene, lighting was a problem, so many of the schools had large windows on the east and the west. The east and the west. But there was always reflection on the blackboards, which was a problem. Many times teaching conditions were just darn primitive. Only an old coal stove in the center for heat, black border too, and a row of hardwood seats. Now, we're going to take a break, and if this was my sixth grade class, I would have you all stand up and do jumping jacks. But I'm not going to have you do that. I'm going to have you sit back, relax, and enjoy this slide program of many of the schools of Butler County.
You can cheer. You can cheer when you have.
Oh, you can, he says you can cheer when you see your school.
Is it loud enough? Too loud.
Out on the windswept prairie, down in the clear cold valleys, stands a little country schoolhouse with a bell and a pot-bellied stove. Down in the dusty gravel, way up on the grassy hill, we haven't forgotten our little country school. And you know we never will. In Oak Creek and in Hilltop and down in Richardson, we brought our own lunch pail on horseback and through dale. Sometimes we earned a spanking and our ponies heard us wail. Near Kansas and Nevada, near Utah and Wyoming, McDuffie's was so dear, they taught us our Shakespeare. We pledged allegiance to the flag from first grade through the years. In Bellwood and in Brainerd and David City too, our schoolhouse was a key to learning history. Hands of our parents built the school and began the community. Out on the windswept prairie, down in the clear cold valleys, stands a little country schoolhouse with a bell and a pot-bellied stove. Down in the dusty gravel, way up on the grassy hill, we haven't forgotten our little country school. And you know we never will. In Oak Creek and in Hilltop and down in Richardson, we brought our own lunch pail on horseback and through dale. Sometimes we earned a spanking and our ponies heard us wail. Near Kansas and Nevada, near Utah and Wyoming, McDuffie's was so dear, they taught us our Shakespeare. We pledged allegiance to the flag from first grade through the years. In Bellwood and in Brainerd and David City too, our schoolhouse was a key to learning history. Hands of our parents built the school and began the community. Out on the windswept prairie, up in the clear cold valleys, stands a little country schoolhouse with a bell and a pot-bellied stove. Down in the dusty gravel, way out on a grassy hill, we haven't forgotten our little country school. And you know we never will.
Now we're going to talk about teachers. Most important person, right? Wouldn't have much without him. The stereotype role of the country school teacher was a single female, even though in the early days, male teachers were preferred, partly because of the thought that they could handle the big farm boys that only went to school in the winter because they helped their parents the rest of the time on the farm. I would have to disagree after hearing a retired Butler County country school teacher, Margaret Hunchy, story of teaching a boy that nobody wanted to teach because he didn't want to be in school and he always wanted to smoke. So she thought about it it, and she made a deal with him that when he needed a smoke, he could raise his hand, leave the school, have his cigarette, and come back in and continue his studies. She said he became a really good student and a very successful person today. So that is going to be interesting. Very clever. Teachers how to be clever. In 1871, 52%, over half of the teachers were men. However, there was still a shortage of teachers since schools were multiplying at a quick rate. So women were even recruited from the East. Also, during the wars, many times male teachers went off to war, often leaving right in the middle of their school year. So there's a letter in the back on one of the display tables which Jerry Kovar wrote when she was 8 years old to her teacher, Mr. Ernie Beanie, which many of you might recognize his name, after he left his teaching position at District 35 to serve in World War II. Jerry was so excited, she also received a reply from him. So check that out on the table back. In his article on country school teaching on the sod house frontier, Wayne E. Fuller states, both the Kansas and Nebraska school laws required that teachers be at least 16 years old before they could teach. But it was not uncommon for them to begin at 15 or even younger, particularly in the 1870s when the demand for teachers outran the supply. But even at the turn of the century and into the early 1900s, Kansas and Nebraska country school teachers were remarkably young. So rapidly did they enter and leave the profession that their teaching careers, usually cut short by matrimony, were over by the time they were 20 years old. As late as 1919, a Nebraska study showed that the median age of the state school teachers was only 21. Just amazing. In 1900, the districts reported that teachers made between $30 and $100 a month. They were only paid for the months that they taught, which also means schools only ran from 4 to 5 or 6 months a year. That was because of the farm work, mainly harvesting, and when they were harvesting, everybody helped with harvest. It was quite common for teachers' pay to include room and board, which helped out a lot for them. With the 1920s and the educational standards that we talked about earlier, salaries rose some. In 1920, there were 93 districts because one of the districts, District 73, dissolved early in its existence. There were 5,000 students, that's quite a few in Butler County, and 163 teachers. The wages of the country school teachers range from $75 to $125 per month. And notice, teachers, the town teachers' salary ranged from $100 to $300. It didn't seem fair with all that a country school teacher had to do. However, with the Great Depression in the 1930s, county teachers' salaries dropped as low as $40 a month again. This is a teacher's cost of living report that was done by a school superintendent in 1920s. I guess it was 21, 22. Notice that there is no money for insurance. Today it's so important to have health insurance, for example. They did not even figure that in on the things that for the cost of living of a teacher. The superintendent figured that the estimate yearly expenses for a teacher was around $1,125. However, many school boards of these country schools had a $1,000 total, and that had to go for everything, not just the teacher's salary. Thus, the 75 to 125 salary for the country school teachers. In comparison, today, for this school year, David City Public Schools per pupil cost is a bit over $22,000. So you figure that 22,000 times the number of students, that's a lot of money compared to the little bit that the country school boards had to. But today we have computers, and we have activities, and we have buses, and we have science equipment, and we can go on and on with the number of things that we have today. Here's a copy of Viola McAllen's teaching contract in 1941 in District 90. Notice the pay is only $50 per month. And notice, especially for you teachers also, notice that she got 3 days for vacation. 1 day for Thanksgiving, 1 day for Christmas, and 1 day for New Year's. Amazing. School boards who were made up of local farmers tried their best to provide for the school and for the teachers, but they were limited. One teacher I talked to said that as late as the 1980s, her school did not have a well, and she had to bring water from her home. Think of the responsibilities of these teachers. This included the housekeeping, as well as starting and maintaining the fire in the coal, wood, or oil stove. On winter mornings, the temperature on the inside was about the same as it was on the outside. The teacher was also responsible to shovel snow and make paths from the door to the road to the outhouses. The teacher tried to get there early and get the fire going before the pupils arrived. Any teacher probably tried to put these things into their discipline program. Genevieve Beanie, a local country school teacher and teaching in the 1940s, said that the school board placed a load of corn cobs and a load of coal in the coal shed for the winter's heat supply. When the weather started getting colder, the first thing to do in the morning was to start the fire with the cobs as a starter and then the coal. She remembers on one occasion, after walking 1.5 miles to school, she came to school, looked at the indoor thermometer, and it was 0 degrees. Now we're going to look at two sets of rules for teachers. These are just fun. This is an 1872 rules for teachers, and I'm going to read a couple of them. The fourth one, men teachers may take one evening each week for courting purposes, or 2 evenings a week if they go to church regularly. It doesn't say anything about women, so I guess they didn't get to court at all. After 10 hours in school, the teacher may spend the remaining time reading the Bible or other good books. Women teachers may marry or engage. Women teachers who marry or engage in unseemly conduct will be dismissed. I think it's really funny, I was an English teacher, but to put those two things in the same sentence, it seems like they equate those things. Every teacher should lay aside from each pay a goodly sum of his earnings for his benefit during his declining years, so that he will not become a burden to society. When you got $50 a month, I don't know how much money you had left over. Any teacher who smoked, used liquor in any form, frequented pool or public halls, or gets shaved in a barber shop will give good reason to suspect his worth, intention, integrity, and honesty. And the teacher who performs his labors faithfully and without fault for 5 years will be given an increase of 25 cents a week, $1 a month. It is paid, providing the Board of Education approves. And for you ladies, you may ride in a buggy with a man if the man is your father or your brother. I, I couldn't find too many newspaper articles about teachers because I think they try to stay out of the news because it would probably mean their job. Now, both of these are in the back so you can look at them. This one is 1915 rules, and they don't get much more lenient. I have to show you just a couple of them. Number four would have get me fired. You teachers know this, right? Number 4 says you may not loiter downtown in ice cream stores. I love ice cream. I don't know. And let's look at 8, 10, and 11. I would, just by wearing slacks and a blouse today, I wouldn't have been hired, first of all, and then I would have been fired if I would have worn it to school. You may not dress in bright colors. I think the kids would like to see you in bright clothes once in a while. Number 10, you must wear at least 2 petticoats. Could be really warm without any air conditioning. And number 11, your dresses must not be any shorter than 2 inches above the ankle. You know, when you read that, it's like when in high school you have 2 inches like above the knee or something. Rose Bonas, who taught in the 1940s in Garfield, District 3, said that the school board had no rule against getting married while teaching, but they frowned upon it. I think that was probably because it was hard to get a substitute if you were pregnant. She did say that she met her husband George during the time she was at District 3. And she also said that if a student misbehaved or didn't do their homework, she kept them after school. But the parents didn't like that because what did the students have to do when they got home? All the chores. The teachers had little or no training in the early days. Many of the 8th graders went right into teaching. In the 1930s and 40s, teachers would attend a local college called a normal school, such as Midland or Concordia, and get maybe 6 or 8 weeks of schooling and receive a grade 3 certificate. When I first saw that, I thought, grade 3, what does that mean? You're going to be teaching more than grade 3. But then when I looked at it more closely, it means that you had 3 years to teach. Some of you probably 3 years to teach, and then you had to go back and get more education. That's right. And then University of Nebraska Kearney, it was known as the Kearney Normal School at the beginning. I didn't realize that. It trained a lot of these teachers, especially on the west side of the state. And now it has a special memorial for country school teachers. It's called the One Room, One Teacher Memorial Wall, and it is connected to a scholarship at Kearney. Here is a report card of 1905. Yes, 1905. Despite the lack of materials, drafty schools, only 1 teacher with possibly 9 grades, the students got a good education. This is amazing to me. In 1900, Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa had the highest literacy rate in the whole United States. That is a tribute to the teachers and the students and parents who supported that education. Eugene Glock, who went to District 33, proudly said that 4 of the 5 top students of the 1949 graduating class of David City High School were from District 33, including him. Notice the report card. Whoever this is, I didn't put the name, I don't believe, had really good grades. And notice the first subject, orthography. We don't have that kind of subject now. Orthography is a combination of phonics, spelling, vocabulary, penmanship. In one-room school photographs, the students many times are pictured wearing overalls and hand-me-downs and worn-out work boots. Many families had little money. What they had was invested in the land and farm equipment. Education was valued, and they scrimped and saved because they wanted their children to have a better life and more opportunity than they did. Many immigrants came to the United States in search of freedom and opportunity. One way that the new immigrants could change their lifestyle and become Americanized was to attend school. The schools gave instruction in English, government, U.S. history, culture. Notice the program on the left. It's a 1908 program of a school. And notice the bottom part. Education is wealth. My dad spoke only Czech when he went to kindergarten in a country school near Ulysses in the 1920s. His teacher required him to speak English and forbid the other kids to talk to him in Czech. He would say that at recess they would whisper to him. He quickly learned English, however, and the handsome little boy in the heart is my dad. Mrs. Helen Hintz, a longtime county teacher, said that the academics were equal, if not slightly higher than the large schools, on account of cross-age grouping, peer tutoring, individualized instruction, and students working at their own pace. Often there were one or two in a grade, so pressure for competition was not great, though most wanted to achieve. Most lessons were memorized, and the children knew what to be expected in the next grade because they had heard older students recite lessons, and the students received personal attention, not only from the teacher, but from younger students were taught by older students who by the time they had finished 8th grade were well qualified to be teachers themselves. And in the early days, many of those 8th graders went on to jobs, teaching jobs with no additional training. Studying aloud was a common practice. Several classes going on at the same time would mean that you had to study out loud to concentrate. You recited your multiplication tables aloud. That was really common. And it's known that if you hear something, you say something, and you see something, you'll probably, remember it more. And always, always, there was one dedicated teacher who knew how to organize and supervise.
Lost your sound. Your battery probably died.
Yeah, we're going to have to, wait a minute.
Watch it. Don't
Here we go. It's on, but I don't know how long. And always, always, there was one dedicated teacher who knew how to organize and supervise. If not, you were not going to survive. Believe me, this was an organizational supervision task. The quality of the...
Shut that one off.
Yeah, I think this one's going.
Woo.
Gotta get away from the...
But
Sorry. Ooh. The quality of the texts were advanced. The commonly used McGuffey readers were first published in 1830 and had 4 levels of readers. Remember those? Thomas in the Cottonwood School near Surprise in 1880 said that the students didn't tell others what grade they were in, but what level of McGuffey they were in. So if you were a fourth grader, you would say, I'm in McGuffey 3 or something like that. Remember the Dick and Jane books? They were the standard reading texts from the 1940s to the 1960s, and many of us learned to read with them. They are so popular now that you can't find them. I went to 2 different big used bookstores, and they didn't have any, and the ladies who ran the places said as soon as they come in, they're gone. Many of the textbooks are in the back, so take a look at those afterwards. This is actually a blackboard from a 1930s school and the daily schedule. I went to the Living Farm south of York and took pictures. They have a school there that is furnished for as a 1920s, 30s school with all the furnishings. It looks just like if you walked in and went to school. Teachers have the big challenge of trying to teach maybe several subjects to each grade. That would have made perhaps 20 classes a day during a period 8 to 3. Some classes were short, such as spelling for 5 minutes, and some classes like math were probably 20 minutes. Also, they doubled up. For example, 5th and 6th grade perhaps had history together, so one year they had 5th grade history and the next year they had 6th grade history. I have a memory of spelling when I was in kindergarten. There were 3 of us in kindergarten. The other 2 were boys who always were misbehaving. And we were kindergartners, and we didn't know cursive, of course, and we'd listen to the older students having their spelling tests. So we wanted to take spelling. So we would take our papers out, get our pencils out, and as they were taking their spelling test, we would just scribble. So scribble, scribble, scribble. That's our spelling. Remember the grade 8 final exam? Oh, some of you are. Here is a sampling from a 1912 exam. The exam is in the back on the table, and Greg asked the answers be there too. The county superintendent prepared the final exam, and then they brought him to the teachers the day of the exam. The students took it. They returned him to the superintendent. He checked them. If you didn't pass, you had to repeat the grade. This system seemed to be encouraging both for the student and the teacher. These are some of the few on the test, but I want you to notice the spelling words. This is 8th grade. Spelling words are a little tricky, but the arithmetic, notice the first one's really long, but let's look at the third one. How many steps, 2 feet, 4 inches each, will a man take in walking 2 1/4 miles? So you have a little bit of, calculating there. Physiology, what are the functions of the spinal column? These on the next page, grammar, parse all the words in the following sentence. John ran over the bridge. John is a noun. This is saying what part of speech. John is a noun, ran is a verb, over is preposition. I was an English teacher. And diagram, remember diagramming? We still do it some. It still has a good purpose. Geography. Greg and I were trying to figure this one out. Through what waters would a vessel pass in going from England through the Suez Canal to Manila? And they don't say where Manila is, so you have to know that Manila is in the Philippines. I think it turned out to be about 8 different bodies of water. This is 8th grade. And civil government. To what 4 governments are students in schools subjected? I think they would say it's a dictatorship, right? History. Is there we do have one history teacher here. Name the last battle of the Civil War, War of 1812, French and Indian War, and the commander in each battle. Could you do that? And you know what? They had no idea what was going to be on this test, so it was kind of quite. Imagine that a school day in the early days in Butler County while you listen to this description of the dear old golden rule days of school taken from the Nebraska Life magazine. The photos were taken by me at a couple of different schools in Nebraska that have been redesigned as early schools. A young female teacher yanks hard on the clanging school bell to greet her students. Soon the students from ages 4 to 18 answer the bell. They put their coats and tin lunch pails in the hallway vestibule and get ready for the long day of lessons. They recite the Pledge of Allegiance after she plays the piano for their morning songs. That strict schoolmarm will check students' fingernails, and if there's any dirt remaining from the farm, they'll have to pump water from the well and scrub their hands with lye soap. Portraits of President Washington and Lincoln hang on the wall by the American flag in the small classroom. There's no electricity, and an early burst of winter whips into the room. Thankfully, their teacher has already loaded up the wood in the potbelly stove, though that won't help a shivering child in the outhouse. The school children sit in their chairs, poised with chalk in their hands, ready to compute their addition and subtraction and multiplication tables on their little slate boards. After the spelling lesson, they'll dip turkey quill pens into inkwells for their cursive penmanship practice. Imagine the mess of inkwells. I used to dread when a student's pen would burst. And they'd always say, "Oh, it just happened." No, you were playing with it. Then minds start to daydream about those lunches packed by their mothers in tobacco tins and peanut butter cans. They might get fried chicken, hard-boiled eggs, or rolled up pancakes with jam left over from breakfast. And for the lucky few, a special treat, the Lord sandwich. Anybody remember the Lord sandwich? Yeah. It was a Depression staple, right? During the Depression. The drink would be water from the well or from a common dipper. Today's health department would have something to say about that. Students would have 2 recesses plus lunch, and that's kind of amazing because nowadays students have 1 recess and lunch. Here are some of the country school games of the early days. Ponder the memories of these activities. Lots of softball, swing set and merry-go-round, crack the whip, Annie Annie over, that was my favorite, fox and geese, teeter-totter and jumping rope and marbles and jacks. I remember Dad showing us how to really play jacks and marbles instead of just, throwing them around. After a snowballs and sledding. The photo at the top is District 53 sledding. As a former principal with liability concerns, I would have cringed at the possible injuries. Sack races. This is District 3 school picnic. Dorothy Oatmer is conducting those sack races. Jane Glock, another longtime educator in the county, talked about traveling to other country schools to have outdoor activities. She said she would stuff everyone into her Model A and go off to have an afternoon of fun with another school. During World War II, many schools had competitions to collect the most tin or the tin foil for the war efforts. 100 years ago, in 1924, 15 country schools had floats in the county fair parade. And Ben Forney, who attended District 13, remembers always playing competitive softball games with District 36. Do you remember which school always won those games? Christmas program and end of the year picnic were the most favorite of all the memories. Everyone in the area, not only the parents, but the grandparents and the neighbors came to these two events, and the students always looked forward to them. For days before the Christmas program, the schoolroom would include a huge curtain that hid the temporary stage. Many times the nativity story would be acted out and students would perform songs and poems. I remember the year that my brother Greg was born. Yes, he is younger than I am. The teacher gave me a poem to recite about how Santa had sent me a baby brother who cried all the time. I didn't make that up. And didn't we always look forward to Santa coming at the end of the program? Jane Glock told me about one Christmas program when the Santa arrived in a store-rented costume with a paper mache mask that had obviously been overused and was smashed and ill-shaped. And Santa actually scared all the children that year. He looked like a Halloween horror. Tom Schmidt, who attended District 13, Lucky 13, remembered one specific Christmas play in which he was so excited to play Ebenezer Scrooge. But the play was canceled due to a hepatitis outbreak. He concluded, bah humbug. Marilyn Uronic Plescott remembers that her dad, Alban Uronic, was the board president and somehow, now you have to think about this, had Santa come to her house for the drive to District 10 for the Christmas program. She didn't recognize her own dad. And do you remember what Santa would always bring? A small brown sack, no matter what school you went to, this is probably what you got. A brown sack that had an apple or an orange, peanuts in a shell, and some hard-colored ribbon candy. You're right. Speaking of holidays, near Halloween time, Judy Davis remembers her school, Oak Hill District 53, near Octavia, burning down during Halloween weekend. And then having school in her family's home. I think she said it was the parents' bedroom. They had school in that for a while until a chicken coop was renovated into a schoolhouse, which still stands at her childhood home. That's a picture of the school slash chicken house. And speaking of fires, Clark Gokin, a retired gentleman from near Rising City, watched his teacher's house burn down in Millerton when he was attending Redeemer Lutheran School near Millerton. That would be tough for the teacher to keep everything together for himself and his students while he watched his own house burning down. A common prank, some weekends, especially Halloween, some of you probably participated in this, would be the well-known tipping of the outhouse. I think every school board tried to out-prank the pranksters. What memories, right? Nebraska was slow to close their one-room schools because there was such community pride and ownership. Also, taxes would usually increase with the consolidation of school districts, so districts dug in their heels. Many had grown up with the schoolhouse as the center of their lives. People were afraid that once the school was closed, it would destroy community life. In 1986, Nebraska still had 385 one-room schoolhouses. That was more than any other state and 45%, almost half, of the entire U.S. total of schools. 20 years later, they were all gone. The reclassification policy placed schools in larger districts instead of the tiny districts that sometimes had only one student in the entire school. With more cars, small towns growing, and buses, the fiscal-minded school boards could no longer justify one teacher with a handful of students in a building. Also, when the first rural schools closed, gas was only 25 cents a gallon. In 1963, there were 27 districts in Butler County. In 1978, 3 rural schools were still active from the original 94. District 1, District 3, and District 26, all with only 6 students in each school. The last country school to close in Butler County was District 3, 2008, after operating as a satellite school for the Schuyler schools. It opened originally in 1869. Most of the country school buildings are now gone, cleared away for farmland in most cases or used for storage. I dragged my brother Greg around the county with a map of all the schools, and we found very few of the schools still existing. District 1, the building, not the first building, but the third school building, is still standing, but the farmer says it will soon be destroyed. We found District 87 Happy Hillside on the corner of an intersection north of Ulysses as a deserted building, but had many of the features of the early school building. And I talked to the farmer, and he says, I will never let anyone destroy that school. He went to that school. A few were made into storage sheds, 38, District 38, District 22, Fairview, now in Rising City. District 8 on Highway 92 near Brainerd was converted into a 2-level home and is now empty. District 10 is the only occupied school building that looks like the original schoolhouse. Owner Mary Soul has registered the school on the Registry of Historical Places, and it is now a bar and gathering place. It was used as a school from 1877 to 1974. Several people who went to District 10 told me that they were so proud that their school was a historical landmark. Others have been renovated as homes, such as when District 3 closed, it became a home, Garfield, District 3. District 6, Oak Creek, became the new build Gunsmoke Lodge with the same footprint as the original District 6. The original District 31 building became a barn, but the second school building became a part of the home near Ulysses. District 55, Richardson, near Dwight, and District 36, Brown School, near Bellwood, pictured with owners Jan and Galen Bach, are homes. Jan, whose maiden name is Schmidt, said that 3 generations of the Nick Schmidt family went to Brown School. There are many families who had several generations go to their country school, which is really neat. Here are District 13 Bellwood, which they kept the bell tower, which really is neat because it has the original District 13 there on top. District 88 Summit, Rising City, the school which traveled the farthest to start its new life is District 33, Pleasant Hill, which moved from near Rising City to Brainerd. District 44, located north of David City, is Sean Hilger's home. His grandmother went to that school, and it's pictured originally at the top, and the bottom is Sean's home. Pranks seem to be often remembered. There were some pranks done directly on the teacher, such as booby trapping the car, which should have gotten those boys a paddling for sure. Sometimes some pranksters would use the school as targets for shooting practice. District 3 has a well-recounted tale of Abe Lincoln being hit. Since the kids could see the bullet hole in his portrait year after year. Carolyn Dworick reported that District 8, La Crosse, the earlier structure is pictured, is the subject of a story of an unidentified mystery man published in the People's Banner in 1931. The badly charred body was found by the teacher in the ruins of the burned out schoolhouse. The coroner's jury found that he was killed by a bullet through his heart and then carried into the schoolhouse and set on fire. However, other reports later indicated that he was a transient who had been smoking in the school and started a deadly fire. I think I now need to stop because I'm sure there's going to be a bell to end my class. So I'll end with this. I barely touched on the many things that made country schools such a blessing to the country students and parents. The one-room schoolhouses were grounded in community. Not only the young people, but the teachers and the parents and the neighbors found community in those schools. Students developed a sense of themselves and what they could accomplish. They had to be responsible and self-motivated. And with those qualities, they became self-confident adults. Community was and still can be the key to success. Thank you. Now, is there anyone who has a question or have some memories of that they want to share?
You mentioned that the schools were charging $6 per student. When did the public schools become free?
Okay, the free schools, that would have been later. I don't know when that, but that would have been, the subscription schools were used for all schools at that time, and I'm not sure when they did. Okay, you're going to take it. Uh-huh.
Because there were only two of us from District 33.
Oh, okay.
The
All
rest of
right.
them were
So
from
they were all from country schools,
country schools.
and two of them from your school.
Yeah.
Okay, I misunderstood when I talked to you. Over. Go ahead if you're.
Hi, Elizabeth Kozishek. I went to District 73, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but in 1957 I was in the second grade, and Starkweather was running around. And I remember all the parents that were toting guns. And our school teacher was Dolores Cecil, and she only had a certificate to teach, and she cried and cried and cried and cried, and we just were like little and don't know what she's crying about. But if you needed to go to the restroom, you had to go with an older person. She'd lock the door behind you, and you went with an eighth grader to the restroom and ran back.
It was a terrible time. I remember it. We were young at that time when Starkweather. Anybody else have a memory or a question? No? Okay, the Darrell sisters are going to share a song with us, so that'll be great, won't it? We always like their songs. Thank you very much.
Over there.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to make everybody stand up, and we're going to start with the pledge.
It's only appropriate. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
And we all went to country school. We didn't go to a one-room schoolhouse, but we went to District 80, which was Garrison School. And so we have memories of Garrison School. And we're going to start with some memories of Garrison School.
And we don't sing it near enough as good as those little children did at the beginning of the game. So I'm glad you played that. School days, dear old golden rule days, reading and writing and arithmetic, taught to the tune of a hickory stick. I was your queen in calico, you were my bashful barefoot beau. When you held my hand, life was grand. When we were a couple of kids.
District 80, dear old Garrison School, reading and writing and arithmetic wasn't taught to the tune of a hickory stick, thank goodness. Going to school was lots of fun. We always got our homework done. Country school was really cool when we were a couple of kids. School days, small town Garrison
Garrison school days, reciting the pledge and then learning a lot, like cursive and Dick and Jane, Puff and Spot. At the end of the day we folded the flag, clapped the erasers, then cleaned with a rag. All the teachers were cool, we sure loved our school when we were at Garrison School, kids.
School days, Christmas program, school days. Putting the stage down, the curtain was hung, learning our lines and the songs to be sung. At the end of the play, we'd all gather round, 'cause Santa would come with that jingle bell sound. Then we'd all get a goodie bag, and we'd really be wound the night of the Garrison School play. This is serious stuff. And now we'd like to read a selection of excerpts from the Garrison Grade School Monthly Gazette, circa 1968, give or take a few years. Mark S. spilled a whole bottle of Elmer's Glue All onto his blue shirt. The white glue was all over and we couldn't figure out how he did it. Mrs. Nicholas had to call his mom to bring him another shirt. Joe got a staple stuck between his teeth during music hour. It scratched his gum. The teacher helped him remove it and told him not to chew on little things anymore. Friday is Chocolate Milk Day. We are all looking forward to that. Next week, we will play kickball against Speedway. It should be a good game. After lunch, we rested while Mrs. Cadeby read a chapter of Misty of Chincoteague or Cinnabon, the 1 o'clock fox.
Picture day is coming up. Please wear a nice shirt and have a clean face. Don's mom will be here to make sure your hair is brushed. Mrs. Price, from across the street, brought sugar cookies to share. Barbara and Laura are in charge of writing the thank you note. The 6th grade boys got into a little trouble on last Friday because they were playing on the fire escape. The rule is never play on or go up the fire escape. It is for emergency use only. Holly and Jane are in charge of cleaning the blackboard and erasers all next week. Jackie had a hard time peeling her banana for lunch. So Miss Jane came to her rescue and helped her out. Or was it Mrs. Brogan? That's a true story. Last week, the girls won stink base, but the boys won Red Rover, send Andy I over. Russell, Howard, Johnny, and Jeff were in charge of feeding the rats for the weekend. The white rats. We were having an experiment. One white rat got candy and sugar, and the other white rat got good stuff to eat. I think they both lived the same amount of time anyway. A healthy game of drop the handkerchief was played at recess on Friday.
The county health nurse was here last Wednesday. Some other county schools are here getting the shot. One little girl was very scared and tried to hide, but it turned out okay. And the shot wasn't so bad. At recess last week, the 6th grade boys caught a ground squirrel and took a marker and colored a red stripe down its back. Mrs. Ball told them they had to let it go. Mrs. Brogan taught us bounce, catch, throw in music class. That was fun. Then we sang Captown Races. We all watched the lesson on how to fold a flag properly. Mrs. McElravy and JD were the ones holding the flag and folding the flag. And this is just a sample of what it was like to attend a small country school years ago. It's great.
We have one more ditty for you. I learned this at District 80. I'm sure I did. And maybe Miss Jane taught us this. Do you remember Sim Salabim Bam Ba Saladu Saladim? No. Is that a no? Okay, well I'm gonna try to sing it, and I don't know why I remember it, and why these two guys didn't know it, or girls. I have no idea. But I made up a couple words, and then they're gonna do the actions for me. High in a tree I heard a crow, sim salabim bam ba saladu saladim. High in a tree I heard a crow caw. A hunter came and found the crow, sim salabim bam ba saladu saladim. A hunter came and found the black crow. He shot the cawing crafty crow, sim salabim bam ba saladu saladim. He shot the cawing crafty crow down. I'm not done. One more numbers. It made me sad to find the crow, sim salabim bam ba saladu saladim. It made me sad to find the crow dead. I'd like everyone to try that line now. Just once. Sim salabim bam ba saladu saladim. Okay. Okay, everybody, are you ready? Here we go. Sim salabim bam ba saladu saladim. All right. That concludes our little what? Oh yeah, remember. What? Don't forget. Oh, and don't forget to what? Be true to your school. Oh yeah, be true to your school. Oh dear.
I have no idea how to follow that. My job is to say thank you to Carm. What a gal. I don't have to say anything more. She speaks for herself. And the Darrow sisters, my gosh, thank you so much. It was a great program. We are grateful to all of you who help out at these events and those who help to sell books and other items. And please remember that volunteers for the BCHS aren't paid. The work is all donation to the cause of preserving history, and it's so nice to see all of you care about history. Thank you. Thank you to Jackie Mashek for her delicious kolache. We appreciate her hard work and for being here to hand it out. It's a wonderful thing. We're so glad for our partners, the Hruska Memorial Library, who is always here to greet you with a smile. And we're so thankful to the Butler County Area Foundation for their financial support of these events. And we certainly appreciate the Event Center. It's a wonderful place to have programs. And of course, we are so grateful to all of you for coming every time. We appreciate it. And if you dropped $1 in the donation box, we just want to let you know thank you. That we really appreciate that. So, the next program is December 2nd here at the Event Center at 6:30 p.m. And we are eager to share this amazing project with you. And Greg Fiala is going to tell us more about that.
our December program is going to be a little bit different than we've had in the past. It's going to be an hour-long movie that we're going to be calling Docu-Memory. It's going to be a documentary-style movie that is being made by Matthew Ostry of Bruno. He is putting together clips of film shot by Steve Barleen and myself. You know how everyone says, usually after it's too late, I wish I would have asked Grandma or Grandpa about that. I know I have. So Steve and I decided to interview 43 senior citizens of Butler County and their stories about growing up and living in Butler County in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s were not only interesting, but entertaining, educational, fun to listen to, and never boring. So please plan to come to see what we feel is going to be a wonderful presentation. And now, before you leave, I hope this works. Let's watch a 3-minute sneak preview so you can all get a glimpse into what our movie will be like.
Lights down.
Lights down, please.
Lights.
Thank you.
I remember the town of Miller. The railroad still went through there when I was in Crofton School.
And then I remember we had a cop box at the house for stove. We had the running water. We had no electricity.
I remember never being hungry or cold. We always had so much fish on the table.
Of course, there was an ice house there at the house, which was still has the foundation over there. I've kind of made a point of trying to preserve that as best I could over the years.
They needed a homestead, and that's how far west they could get before there was homestead available. So I imagine that's why they're in Butler County. Everything was towards the war. You know, at that age, we were still all as kids thinking about the war. We just knew, we didn't have television and stuff to hear it, but we were just so aware of it.
Went from York through Gresham and Surprise and headed to David City. And that railroad went right on the west side of that where I go to church. There's still, you can see where the tracks were.
Well, this is a piece of a log cabin.
Speaking of my grandparents, I knew that my mother's parents lost their farm in the Depression. They told that great-grandma and granddad had been someplace with their horse and buggy and was coming home when a blizzard hit.
Yeah, that was the good old days.
Well, there's been a lot of changes in machinery in my lifetime.
How times were so hard, so hard. But we made wonderful friends. You know, they were like family.
Well, we've had a wonderful life.
We had a great life, really. Everything that we wanted or needed, we had.
So we hope to see you December 2nd.